जिंदा खुदा से दिल जो लगाते तो खूब था,
जिंदा खुदा से दिल जो लगाते तो खूब था।
मुर्दा बुतों से जान, मुर्दा बुतों से जान छुड़ाते तो खूब था.
Okay, let's begin. So may I please request Sabahat Aman Ahmed to do the tilawat, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
So,
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد مننا على موسى وهارون ونجيناهما وقومهما من الكرب العظيم ونصرناهم فكانوا هم الغالبين وآتيناهما الكتاب المستبين وهديناهما الصراط المستقيم وتركنا عليهما في الآخرين سلام على موسى وهارون. The translation of the verses recited before you is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. And indeed, we bestowed favors on Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salam. And we saved them both and their people from the great distress. And we helped them, and it was they who were victorious. And we gave them the book that made things clear, and we guided them to the right path. And we left for them a good name among succeeding generations. Peace be on Musa alayhi salam and Harun alayhi salam. Jazakallah.
let's try again. Jazakallah, not Jazak. Right, so today we're moving on to the Prophet Moses. So who was the Prophet Moses alayhi salam? So Hazrat Musa alayhi salam in Arabic, or Moses in the Bible, is actually mentioned 502 times in the Holy Quran. So his name has come up more than any other prophet's name. Of course, the Holy Prophet Muhammad has only been named 4 times, but there are a lot of references actually to him. His name has come up 4 times, whereas Moses' name has come up 502 times. And so there is a full description of his life from his birth all the way to his death. Now, like the Holy Prophet Muhammad, he was a law-bearing prophet. So this is something which, again, we need to understand, because the Holy Quran is very clear that we should make no distinction between any prophets. But Allah's made a distinction. There is law-bearing prophets, those that bring the laws, like Moses and the Holy Prophet Muhammad. And there are followers of the law-bearing prophets, all those Jewish prophets, including Jesus, after Moses. And then, of course, Allah's made a further distinction by calling the Holy Prophet Muhammad Khat Nabiyyin, which is the best or the seal of prophets. So this is why there is a distinction. But as for us, we always give alayhi salam Allah's peace be upon any prophet that we're talking about. So there are 2 main law-bearing prophets. One was Moses, and the other one was, of course, the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Now, most of the key elements in Moses' life, which are narrated in the Bible, are to be found dispersed through the different chapters of the Holy Quran, with the inclusion of the story about the meeting of Khidr, which is not found in the Bible. So this is something which is only found in the Holy Quran. Now, of course, as I pointed out before, there are 5 books of Moses, but content-wise, there's very, very little. So the first book, Genesis, I've been mentioning about, and they're showing so many flaws in Genesis with the other prophets. Moses' own story really begins in the book of Exodus, where he is talking about how he took the Jews into the promised land and so on and so forth, where he didn't actually reach it, but he tried. And then there is, what's it called? Levius, or something like this, which is not really much content. Numbers is really about the children, the Jews themselves, the numbers of Jews, the people and stuff like that. So it's about people, personages. And then Deuteronomy, which again comes a bit like Exodus. It's got a bit more of a story there, but still, as books, we can say that Exodus and Deuteronomy are containing some of the 10 Commandments and other laws. The rest are just really stories and numbers of different people and so on and so forth. Anyway, the story of Moses begins with his birth. Now, the Jews by that time, they were living in captivity in Egypt, and they were being forced to build the cities and the pyramids. So they were slaves, and because obviously the Egyptians needed people to build these pyramids and so on and so forth. And of course, it's remarkable when you see the pyramids. I don't know if anybody's actually been there. I always had the impression that a pyramid was a triangle, but when you actually go there, you see that it's big stones and they're just building up until you get that sort of triangle shape. But those stones, how they got there, how the pyramids was built, and of course, there's all these hidden chambers. It's remarkable for that period of time. But anyway, it was the Jews that helped the Egyptians, or forced to help the Egyptians to move these big, huge stones to build the pyramids. And of course, they built many different cities as well. Now, the Pharaoh, he was behaving very arrogantly. And to ensure that there wasn't a rebellion, he decided to divide the people. And when we say divide the people, that means that he was killing the baby boys and sparing the women. And so it's what we call in the West the policy of divide and rule. So the Holy Quran states that Allah directed the mother of Moses by revelation to suckle Moses and then cast him into the river. Now, this was because, as I said, that Pharaoh had issued an order that all the male children, they had to be killed. So to reduce the strength, if you like, to stop getting that rebellion. So Moses knew this, that the child that she just had, the boy, would be killed. And of course, like all the mothers, she was frightened what would happen. But Allah guided her by revelation and told her that first suckle him so that he knows who the mother is, and then cast him in the river, made an ark, a little sort of boat, put him in the river Nile and pushed him along. Allah also reassured her that she would be reunited with him and that he would have a great future as a prophet. So here it indicates then that he was going to go to a good age and be a prophet. Now, the Bible differs a little bit and states that it was actually the mother's own whim that she decided to put Moses into the river Nile. So the same story of putting him into the river Nile, but there's no mention in the Bible that this was God that guided her. Instead, it was her own reasoning, her own fears or whatever, that rather than kill the child, save it by this way. Anyway, whatever, we of course believe the Quran is correct. But then the Holy Quran states that one of the family of Pharaoh picked him up, whereas the Bible states that it was actually his daughter. Now, we going to the Quran, which we think is the correct one, that Pharaoh's wife convinced Pharaoh to allow her to keep her as a son because he was not blessed with any children. Now, if it was a daughter, there's no mention that the daughter had a husband or anything like this. So it sounds more likely that it would be the wife of Pharaoh. Anyway, as far as we know, Moses grew up in the family of Pharaoh. The Quran then states that Moses refused the wet nurses. So the mother tried to get some people to wet nurse Moses, feed Moses, but he refused them. So then Moses' own sister approached them and said that she could find someone that could wean Moses. And so she went and got her mother, and this is how the mother was reunited with Moses. Now, Pharaoh's wife calls him Moses, names him Moses, because Moses means to draw out. And so as Moses was drawn out of the river Nile, so this is where supposedly the name came from. Now, as I said, the Bible states that not only was it a daughter who found Moses, but it was a daughter that raised him. But we believe, of course, it was a mother that raised him, or at least was in charge of those that raised him. The Holy Quran then moves on to when Moses now was a young man. Now, although he'd been growing up in the Pharaoh's household as an Egyptian, he was an Egyptian prince because obviously this was the king and the queen, but he knew that he was a Jew. Now, maybe, of course, that was his mother who told him, or maybe some other people, but he was told to keep it a secret. Don't declare that you're a Jew, because obviously they were slaves. And so, as the Holy Quran says, but most people knew not. Now, both the Holy Quran and the Holy Bible relates then that how Moses came to the aid of a Jew and killed an Egyptian. But again, there is a difference, because in the Bible states that he on purposely killed the Jew, whereas the Holy Quran says that he hit him with his fist, and that caused his death. Now, of course, if you're hitting someone with a fist, we see boxers all the time, you don't die from that. So maybe he hit him, he fell, hit a rock, and died from that way, whatever way. But obviously, by just hitting him with a fist, that is not a way of killing a person. So we believe that he had no intention of killing him. Therefore, we don't believe that he committed this sin, whereas the Bible is making this assertion that he on purposely killed a person and so committed a sin. And the Holy Quran further supports this by declaring that God forgave him. So God felt that he was innocent. He didn't commit any wrongs in this. Now, Pharaoh then announced that Moses should be killed for the murder of this Egyptian. I think it was a soldier or something like this. And so now Moses heard that there was a death warrant on him. And so he fled from the unjust people. So again, the fact that the Holy Quran says they're unjust people, I mean, there's wisdom behind this. So it shows that he was innocent, but they're trying to kill him. And so they were being unjust. If, as the Bible says, that he on purposely killed him, then how are they unjust? He should be done for murder. But in this case, he was going to be killed for no fault of his own. So that's why the Holy Quran declares the unjust people. Then we know that Moses traveled to Medina, where he helps then two women who had flock of sheep, and they were not being allowed by the other shepherds. And so he then helps these women to water their flock. Now, again, the Bible sort of portrays that it was a fight like that. There's no such mention of that in the Holy Quran. What we do know is that the father was impressed and then offered him to work for them and to marry one of his daughters. Now, I mentioned this before when we was talking about Shuaib, that who was this old man, as it's mentioned, because the Holy Quran doesn't mention his name. But when we go to the Bible, it mentions that he was a priest. And again, there's a difference here, because the Bible, first of all, calls him Riol, but then later on, Jethro. So I don't know why he's been called two different names. There's no explanation for that. It's in the same book of Exodus and straight after each other. But anyway, as I said, some Muslims believe that he was Shuaib, and I explained this last time, that we don't think that it was Shuaib. There's no indication that he was a prophet or did anything like that. It's really going to the town of Medina, that because this town's been mentioned twice, so the connection with Shuaib. Anyway, after many years, I think the Quran says about 8 to 10 years, Moses finally leaves with his family. And then along the way, he perceives a fire. And so he speaks to God. Now, again, this is a thing that we say that, of course, you can't see God with your physical eyes, but God may show himself. Now, this will come a bit later on, but in this case, God shows himself as a fire. And later on, there is indication that in the Bible that God actually met him and spoke to him and saw him, but we don't believe that's possible for a human being. Anyway, let's keep to now. So God informs him that he should now go to Pharaoh and deliver the Jews from captivity. Now, of course, Moses had this death warrant on him. If he goes back, they will try to kill him. So, of course, he was concerned about this. So Allah reassures him and says that I'll give you 2 signs to show Pharaoh, and that is the rod and the white hand. So these were 2 signs, particularly to meet Pharaoh, to convince him that there's a powerful God supporting him. Moses asks Allah for help from his brother Aaron, as he is more eloquent in speech than him. Now, again, there's this idea that Moses couldn't speak properly. I don't know where that's come from. Obviously, Moses had grown up as a prince, and he would have been able to speak properly. But Aaron was a righteous person. He was a Levite, which later on became a high priest and a prophet, and he was much more elegant in speech. That's one point. The other thing, of course, was that Moses grew up as an Egyptian. The Jews knew that he was an Egyptian, whereas, of course, Aaron grew up as a righteous person of the Jews. So the Jews respected Aaron more as a godly person than they would have done with Moses. So obviously, he's not only going to Pharaoh, but he would have to go to the Jews, convince the Jews that this is what Allah wants. They're more likely to listen to Aaron than to him. So this is why Moses was asking for the help of Aaron, and God gave him that permission. So then it moves on that how Moses then met Pharaoh. Of course, they knew each other because he grew up in his household. Moses showed these 2 signs, the rod turning into a snake and the white hand. But Pharaoh didn't believe him, and he behaved very arrogantly. In fact, so much so that one verse of the Holy Quran says that he asked for a tower to be built so that he can go up and see this God of Moses. In other words, he was mocking Moses, that what kind of God do you think he is? Now, we have to bear in mind, of course, that Pharaoh himself projected himself as a God. He expected people to worship him. And so why should he now accept the God of Moses? So after seeing these 2 clear signs, still Moses started treating the Jews even worse. And the idea behind that, of course, is that then the Jews would turn against Moses and do his job for him. But still, there was this sort of magic, which Pharaoh presumed was magic. And so therefore he called all the top magicians for a magic contest with Moses, so that they could see this rod that turned into a snake and so on and so forth. And he decided that everyone should be there. It was a festival. And that also helped then Moses, because then he could show everyone about God and the power of God. So first of all, they asked, should Moses start? And Moses said, no, you start. And so the magicians started performing their wonderful tricks. Now we know some magicians, they are very, very clever. And when Moses himself saw this magic, he himself became concerned that how am I going to beat this? This is wonderful magic. And, even these days, with all the modern technology, it can baffle you how they do these wonderful magic tricks. But God assured Moses that you will have the upper hand. And so God said to Moses, cast down your rod and it will swallow up all the magic. So of course we understand that magic is basically deception. That's all that magic is. It's not really magic. And so the rod removed the deception. And so everyone could now see these tricks that the magicians were doing. Of course, magicians, we hear these days magic circles, so on and so forth. They talk to each other, they know about magic, they know how these things work. But suddenly this rod was showing all the magic, revealing all the magic. And this, they realized this can't be magic. This is not some magic trick. Instead, there was a higher power at hand. And so according to the Holy Quran, they submitted to Allah. When they saw this, they realized that it's God and they submitted to Allah. That, of course, outraged Pharaoh, and he threatened in a terrible way to crucify them by crucifying the alternative, their feet and their hands, to scare them. But they still said, no, we don't care about present life. We care about the future. And so even though there was this great threat and they're going to die, still they stood firm and said, no, we're going to be submissive to God. So now what did Pharaoh do? He's seen all this, but he still felt that now they sided with him and everyone was against him. He was paranoid. And so he continued to persecute the Jews even more. And so it relates how Moses showed a great sign and finally Pharaoh repented. But then as soon as the sign was released, he again started persecution. Another sign was shown. Again, he repented. The sign was stopped. Again, he started persecuting. And sign after sign, this pattern happened, that Pharaoh would not stop persecuting the Jews. And so each time he, as it says, pleaded with Moses for God to stop the punishment. But when God did stop it, even though he said that he would then believe and release the children of Israel, once it was removed, he continued with this persecution. Now, according to the Bible, there were 12 signs that were shown. The white hand and the rod had already been shown. Then there was these other 10, what is termed as 10 plagues of Egypt. There is a difference. In the Holy Quran, they say that there was 9 signs. The rod and the white hand being 2 of them. So then there was a drought, which according to this, the drought would have caused the livestock to die. So that could be referring to the livestock die. Then there was a sanctity of fruit. So again, overwhelming darkness would again cause this sort of fruit to suffer. They need light and so on and so forth. So maybe that's what it's referring to there. Then there was a storm. And again, the Bible says that there was this pounding hailstones. And then there was all these swarms of locusts. So they both agree with that. The lice, where it says in the Bible, masses of flies. Flies are like lice. So maybe it was some sort of insect. So maybe it's that. Frogs, again, there was this infestation of frogs and blood, that the water itself turned to blood. So these are maybe some of the signs which are shown there, which means that the gnats, unless that's relating to the lice, but it doesn't seem to be mentioned in the Holy Quran. The outbreak of boils, again, is not mentioned in the Holy Quran. And death of the firstborn. And that was the final sign, according to the Bible, that all the firstborns were killed, except for the Jews, of course. Anyway, after the final sign, finally Pharaoh gave in and allowed the children of Israel to leave. But once they left, he again decided that this is wrong. If people saw this, then they would be against, people see the weaknesses against him. So therefore, he decided to chase after the Jews. So he took his army and chased after them. As the Holy Quran says, we took vengeance upon them and drowned them in the sea because they treated our signs as lies and we were heedless of them. So this is the punishment that happened. Now, the fourth Caliph of Rahmullah, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, in one of his question answer sessions, I remember it well, he questioned whether it was the Red Sea that crossed. Now, of course, the general belief is the Red Sea. So when I heard this, I made my own investigations to see what was being said. What the fourth Caliph said was that the Jews were felt to be living around the town Ramses. And then they moved from Ramses to a place called Pi Hahiroth, which is around 75 miles away. So in one night, they traveled 75 miles. So what the full proof is saying is that we've got to bear in mind there were thousands and thousands of Jews, apparently. And in one night on foot, these people, with the old people, with the sick, with the cattle, with the goods and all this stuff, traveled 75 miles. It seems very unlikely. Now, again, it says that they crossed the Red Sea, but when the Red Sea is very wide and the smallest part is about 2 miles from each other, whereas the Holy Quran says that they saw them. So while you looked on. Now, again, you've got a question, can you see 2 miles? Okay, it's sea, it's flat, but 2 miles? It seems very unlikely that they would have been looking on and seeing the Romans come, the Egyptians come and be drowned. So what Azur was proposing, that it's more likely that instead of crossing the Red Sea, they crossed the delta of the River Nile. So now here's a map. This is the town Ramses, where we think that the Jews were. It's generally felt even in this map. And as you can see, this is that other town, which I find difficult to pronounce, Pi Hahiroth. So this is about 75 miles away. You can see a chart there, so it's showing this. And then they crossed the Red Sea there, which is about, like I say, 2 miles. So we feel that it was in a delta. And as you know, the delta is this sort of all these different rivers that's going into the sea. And because it's going into the sea, the river can be affected by the tide. So any river, if you go to the estuary, the beginning of the river, you can see that it will sink when the tide goes out. So we feel that maybe they crossed one of the deltas, presumably where the arrow is, and that's obviously could be done in overnight. And so that was where now the Jews, the Egyptians came to hunt down the Jews. So when Moses reached, it was ebb tide, and the river receded, and they crossed over the dry bed. Now, I often take people up here in the north to a place called Holy Island, Linda's Farm. And what I show them, and even Imam Sahib and other people, is that when the tide's in, it's an island. But when the tide comes out, there's a road that appears that leads to the island. And so this is how I show how when the tide comes out, maybe they crossed over the beds, just like when the tide's out, you can cross over the river. So here's a picture depicting what they generally say, that the sides of the water parted from each other. But we feel that they went just over the beds. Now, of course, Pharaoh then came with these heavy chariots and tried to cross over this sort of muddy path. And of course, they would have got stuck on the waterbed. And so when the tide came back in, this is how they drowned. And it's related in the Holy Quran that when Pharaoh was about to die, he then proclaimed that he now believed in the one God. And so God said, what now? You're just about to die. Now you believe. This is too late. But what I'll do is I will save your body as a sign. And of course, this is a wonderful prophecy. So the Holy Quran is the only book that mentions about this. It's not mentioned in the Bible. Now, after 3,000 years, people have found in the pyramids the body of Pharaoh, and of course they mummify the body, and so it was preserved. So as the Bible was saying, the Quran is saying that his body would be saved as a sign. This is how we feel it got mummified and preserved. Now, there are people that question this. And the thing is, what they say is that Moses was born in the time of Ramses II. He was brought up by him. But what we say is that it wasn't during his lifetime that the persecution happened. It was during his son, Merneptah. And that was when he came back and he proclaimed to be a prophet, and then led to the Egyptians dying. So it was him that would have been drowned. Now, of course, they found both bodies, but they feel generally that Ramses died of just normal old age. He was very old. So they say that he didn't die by drowning. But again, if we turn to the Bible, in Exodus 15:19, it says, "For the horse of Pharaoh went in to the water with his chariots and with his horsemen into the sea, and the Lord brought again the waters of the sea against him." So this shows, according to the Bible, that Pharaoh went with his army into the sea and got drowned. So this is Ramses' body, and many Muslims believe that it's Ramses, but we don't. So as I said, it's popularly believed that Ramses II was the Pharaoh at the time of Moses, and as we said, he was in the early stage. So they dispute whether Ramses died drowned or of old age. So this is a picture of the sarcophagus of Merneptah. So this is where they would have put the mummified body into. Again, this is a portrait of him, and then what he looked like mummified. So this again is a picture of him as a mummy. Now, there's still plenty to say, but I think we're going to have to do part 2 on this and continue it on part 2. So today we'll stop it there, and we'll just open it up now for questions. Anybody's got any comments, questions on this? As I said, there is still about Moses going into the promised land, which I think I will cover next time because already it's getting late. So anybody got any questions they'd like to say? Yes, please.
Assalamualaikum.
Welcome, Islam.
I just wanted to make a comment about the whole issue whether Moses crossed the Red Sea or whether there was another area. Again, I remember reading Khalifa Rabi's explanation, and I remember learning in school, I just double checked, the written Hebrew language doesn't have any vowel sounds. So A, E, I, O, U, they don't write them down. So, and now a lot of biblical experts also believe that the area Moses crossed wasn't the Red Sea, but it was the Reed Sea. So it might have been a misinterpretation because they wouldn't have written down the E's. It would have just been RD, well, their equivalent of RD.
Yeah, so I mean, very good. The River Nile, of course, is famous for reeds. As we said, Moses was put into the River Nile where the reeds were. And as I said, it is affected by the tidal waves. So I agree with you. It's an interpretation of Sea of Reeds. It's not actually saying Red Sea, Sea of Reeds. And that's why it could also be the River Nile, because there are reeds in the River Nile. And as I said, it can be affected. So it's not a sea, but it's still coming into the sea, in the estuary. So yes, very good point. Well done, Shabash. Any other comments, questions, or anything you'd like to say on this? As I said, there's a lot mentioned about Moses. We've only just covered part of it, but there is a lot mentioned. The early part of his life, as I mentioned, there are some allegations made against Moses. We'll go into many of them in the second part. But one of the things was about the killing of the soldier or something like this. And as we explained, that how is it possible that he on purposely killed him if he just hit him with a fist? So the Bible does sort of indicate that he on purposely killed him, but we obviously will follow the Holy Quran. That seems much more logical. So that allegation, again, we will remove over Moses, that he killed someone on purposely. He killed someone, but it was accident. Accidents does happen. So any views on that or anything else that anybody wants to give?
Rabbi Sab, I just wanted to ask something. At that time, basically, when Hazrat Moses alayhi salam, is that the time when Judaism was just kind of newly started or something?
It developed. I mean, obviously, the laws, as we'll get into in the second part, was given. Initially, Moses would explain some things, but the 10 Commandments, the other laws were there. So, of course, as we said, the Judaism began with Jacob, who was called Israel. But then they moved to Egypt. But over time, because we talked about how Joseph settled in Egypt and how he brought his family there. So now the Jews grew up in Egypt. And over time, like I say, they then was overcome by the Egyptians and became slaves. So again, when this actually happened, there's some dispute, of course, whether there was a person. Some people try to say that there wasn't even Moses. We, of course, believe there was Moses. But when it actually happened, they're not sure. And this is why there's some differences even about which Pharaoh was it. But generally, yes, you're right. When Moses came, then Judaism took a big turn, and the rules and regulations was enforced much more, what they should do, how they should behave. There was guidance before, of course, but not as much detail as when Moses then laid down the 10 Commandments. And when we say the 10 Commandments, that's just 10 rules. There were many, many rules that Moses explained. Some of them difficult to read as well, but still it's there. And a lot of people, especially the way the rules against women, they have a lot of objections that this seems a bias against women and so on and so forth. But that was the rules that Moses taught. So that's where Judaism really started to develop. And then, of course, with Moses taking them into the Promised Land, although he himself didn't ever go into the Promised Land himself, it was Joshua that took him in. But now they went back to the Promised Land. They went back to what is now known as Israel and Palestine. And again, that's where Judaism again flourished. So this was, you could say, a big turning point for Judaism. So before that, it was quite minor, although there was a lot of Jews in Egypt. But this is where it really developed. So yes, you're right. Anybody got anything else they want to say? Okay, well, again, as I said, the birth of Moses, how we believe in the Holy Quran, Allah guided it to happen. And again, it's a wonderful thing. And the advantage of growing up as an Egyptian prince, that obviously was a best way of having a early life. And then coming to the, well, after leaving, obviously, that place because he killed a person, and then coming back and helping the Jews. We're going to, in the next stage, in part 2, maybe next week or whenever, show that even though they've seen all these remarkable signs, and really, I mean, there were great signs, 12 great signs, and many other signs were shown. And the parting of the sea that they're depicting here, but still, they safely got across the water, and then the Jews were drowned. In itself is a great sign. And yet how quickly they turned against Moses and turned against God. And that's also quite a remarkable thing. But that said, we'll cover next week or whenever we cover part 2. Okay, well, then we'll leave it there today. And inshallah, we will come and do the second part next week. Or week after, I'm not sure. Right, please join me in silent prayer. Bismillah. Amen. Okay, Assalamu alaikum.